I think I was still a teenager. I didn't finish high school, and I was pretty determined to play music. And I worked at a factory, and it sucked. And most things that are terrible can often be a good motivator, and that in my case worked. For some people, it kind of brings you down, and maybe you make bad choices. But for me, kind of like I was just lucky to have music because I just thought, this is awesome. I'm going to do it. And it's a little bit of maybe ignorance or blind confidence. I had more confidence than skill, I think, back then. And I had a band, and we were like a band that would open for other bands. So whenever like a band would want to play, Thrush Hermit or something would want to play Toronto on like a Friday or Saturday. So they're often going to play like those secondary markets on the Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So, just where I grew up, there was a lot of cool bands that would just play in our town, basically, because as you know, like rather than have a night off, you just want to play a gig, So sometimes we'd like open for all these rad bands and play to 10 people and got a lot of experience doing that. But yeah, that first band of mine, like we applied for a grant and we got a recording grant for a few $1,000s, which at the time may as well have been $1 million, So some of that early validation just from like guys that I looked up to. I mean, people that I still see and play with or run into at festivals and stuff, the Local Rabbits and the Super Friends and, a lot of the sort of indie bands in the 90s and stuff that were touring around. Just to play with those guys at a young age was a pretty formative experience, and it seemed like they were rock stars, but they also just were people. So it seemed like something I could do, So even if it wasn't always like a direct musical inspiration, like playing with those bands early, getting that experience to like play with bands that were on tour that weren't from the town I was from, that was like super inspiring. And I think that was kind of the start of my professional career. I mean, technically we got paid even if it was like $50. So, it was professional in that way, but I think more it was just like the attitude of how to approach it, I mean, I think it's a bit of both, you know what I mean? I think it's always a bit of both. I do like collaborating, and I have, that's still something that I do. On every album, I like to work with different musicians and, different bands and it's complicated. Like, as you know, it's complicated to navigate that as a band leader because, well, shit, I really like playing with this person, but I want to go play with this person too. So you have to, I find the best way is just to be honest and navigate those personal relationships. But in my case, I'm lucky that sort of I've just been able to play with all these incredible players and who have just brought so much to my music and inspired me in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think collaboration is really important. And at the same time, like I'm kind of someone who's dangerously comfortable with my own company. I mean, that's kind of why I live here, I kind of like being alone and I played in bands, like more like traditional bands where it was like equal split. And in some ways we complemented each other, but in a lot of ways we just butt heads because I was always the guy like, Mike, who I used to play with, who I still play with, he played bass on my last record. He's an incredible guitar player, but he's almost like Brian May or something. He's playing all these notes and he has all these ideas for harmonies and keyboard parts. And he always wanted to do more and all these different layers. And I was just always the guy like, yeah, but why don't we just play this one riff in unison over and over again, So when he formed Zeus and went to make that music, that just made sense. When I made the first Bahamas record, it was like almost a reaction to collaborating. I was like, okay, finally I can just do what I want to do, which is just play that one riff over and over again, So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of a long-winded answer, but I do think kind of both things are important, it's it's amazing to have a community of people that you trust, because sometimes you come up with ideas and you're not sure if it's a good idea. And, you have to trust the person who's telling you that it's not a good idea. Because if you don't, then you take it personally. So it's nice to have sort of definitely have like a tight sort of small core group of people that I would sort of go to in those moments. But yeah, I don't know. It's you also kind of have to believe in your ideas when nobody else does. So that requires that kind of lone wolf mentality when people are telling you, oh, that's not very good, but you're like, yeah, but it is good. I know it's good. So you kind of always walk in that line, I think. I mean, even when we moved out here, like we considered moving to Los Angeles just because a lot of the musicians I like to work with are out there. There's so many incredible producers and studios. Like basically all the infrastructure for the music business has moved to the West Coast. And so we thought about that, professionally, but ultimately, like I just, we decided to come here just more for our family life, more for what I do outside of music. And this year has been such a learning curve just because I'm like physically isolated. Like I know there's great musicians out here, but I'm not necessarily tapped into that community in the same way. And so, having to do things on my own or do things remotely, as we all are, is kind of like, it's a good thing, because it's allowing me to develop some new skills. I'm not really like, I don't know. I'm not really wallowing in the thing. I mean, I know it sucks and I miss gigging and I miss playing and everything like that, but it's also like, I've done a lot of cool stuff this year and I probably wouldn't have done that if I wasn't like on my own. At the same time, like you could say the exact same thing in normal times, right? Mm-hmm. When like for me, this idea that you're supposed to just be go, 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 go all the time, that's unsustainable too, right? At some point, your marriage is going to suffer, your family life's going to suffer, your health, your mental health, your physical health, you're going to have a drinking problem. You're going to, you know what I mean? You make bad choices if you just do that for too long. You can do it for a period. And I've certainly done that. Like, on the last album cycle, we were just touring a lot. And on some ways it feels good, right? Because you feel this sense of pride that you're doing something that's worthy of your time. But you know that if you're not working double time on the other end of things, then things can go south pretty quick. So I mean, for me, that's always been the case. I think for a lot of musicians, right? Like the music, not to be cavalier about it, but like the music kind of comes easy to me. I love doing it. It's fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy the work. I love the camaraderie. I love being around musicians. I love the joking. I love the whole thing. Managing my expectations and managing my family life takes way more work than like playing a show. So I think most people are probably in that same boat. It's like, and as I get older and as I kind of get more comfortable with what I'm doing, I just enjoy it more. I just enjoy the whole thing more. I enjoy the grind. What used to be like about like earning cred is now just like, man, this is fun. Let's do it. Okay, I'll mention a couple of things. The first thing is I worked as a sideman before I did my own thing, and I enjoyed that. I like really, really enjoyed it. And I played in different bands and I played on people's albums. Believe it or not, people used to call me to play guitar on the records. They don't call me anymore for some reason. They call Christine and they call other people now. But anyway, I did enjoy that. And then I had this gig playing with Feist. And when that gig ended, I mean, it never dawned on me that the gig was going to end, right? It just was like, I was in this cool band. The music was cool. The money was great. We were playing SNL and the Grammys, like, whatever prestige, whatever my ego wanted out of music, I kind of was there when I was like 27, and I'm grateful for that because I got to have all these sort of formative experiences, but kind of just be on the side. The spotlight wasn't on me. I was like part of the band in a real way, in an honest way, and just contributing a little bit every night to kind of make a cool show, or a cool recording or whatever. And that was huge, like huge learning curve, you know, like a lot of pressure. And when that ended, and I didn't have a gig, and I had some author offers to go on tour with other bands, but to my mind, I just like that was kind of the turning point for me to take my own songs and my own music seriously in another, in another way, to be really hard on my own music. Because I had written songs, I had bands before that, but if I'm being honest now, like the quality of the songs it just wasn't there. Like songs weren't good enough to compete in the marketplace of music, you know what I mean? And a lot of that's just about finding what works for you. I was looking at other people and saying, oh, I could try that. I'll, make a song that sounds like Wilco, or make a song that sounds like this, as opposed to being like, well, what do I sound like, And that's so cheesy to say, but there's just no shortcut. Like some people find it when they're 21, and some people don't find it until they're, Mary Gauthier making her debut album when she's like 50, and it's like an incredible album. It's like, how is this your first album, Anyway, when I got to that thing, I had this realization. It's like, well, if I want to be a sideman, I'm not going to have control over, when I go on tour. I'm not going to have control over what I play. I'm not going to have control over, I'll get to make a little bit of money, and I'll get to sort of have these, whatever prestige comes playing with that band. I'll get to travel. I'll get to do all these wonderful things, but it'll never be my thing. And that was, that sort of shift for me was a huge milestone, I guess, because I just realized, well, if it's my thing, well, then there's no reason I couldn't get paid $1 million a night. Right. Like it sounds silly, but it just like, as soon as if you work for someone else, you're never going to have a control over those things. Right. If you have your own business, if you own your own corner store, well, you can work 24 hours a day if you want to. If you're someone who has the capacity to do that, you can do that. And you can think, oh, what do my customers like to buy? They like to buy ice cream and chips, and I'm going to make sure I have those stocked, and I got the toilet paper, and I got I'm going to have a little pizza thing in the corner. It can be whatever you want it to be. And I kind of just like, that realization was so important to me. And I think that just entrepreneurship in general, I think it'd be cool if we told kids that more, like especially young people, just like, that's the cool thing about being on your own, not just in music, but just in general, right? Like it can be whatever you want it to be. The sky's the limit, like literally. That's such an inspiring thing. I still think about that. Anyway, that's probably not interesting, but that's a long-winded version. But anyway, in that process, I was playing in this other band. I was playing with Jay Collette, and I'd started playing with Feist, and so I was bouncing between these tours, and for a long time, I just thought I could do that indefinitely. Be in his band and be in her band, and her thing just, it took over. It was a big gig, but I was too immature. I didn't have the courage to like essentially quit Jay's band. And to the point where he kind of like called me on it and just said like, dude, you got to make a call. Like, she's dangling this carrot in front of you. It's a pretty nice carrot, like, but you have to be man up basically and say, listen, I'm going to go do this thing, as opposed to like this unrealistic thing where I'm just trying to manage too much, And it was embarrassing. It was fucking hard. It's hard to like have someone call you out like that, And, we went through growing pains, but ultimately, like, I just fucking respect him so much for calling me out like that and forcing me to kind of like speak to what I was feeling, which is like, yeah, I got this other opportunity. I want to pursue it, and to do that, I got to let go of this other thing, So that for me was a big milestone, just in being honest and being, I guess having integrity. Again, like that sounds fucking cheesy to say that, but it's just like, people respect that, if you can just say what you feel, if you can just be honest, if you can say, Darce, you're a great bass player, but I think I'm going to make this record with Mike, or, you know, I have this idea. I want to go to LA and I'm going to work with Pino or whatever. It's like, people, when you're honest like that, people hear that and say, fuck, that's going to be great. Awesome. As opposed to taking it personally, you know? And, yeah, I don't know. I think there's something really important there for me that I've tried to live out. I still fail from time to time. You get caught up. You're not thinking all the time about everything. But I mean, um, I don't know. I just think that that's kind of ultimately the most important thing, you know, because I want to have a long career in music. So ideally, I want to be able to be 70 and call the guys that I'm working with now and be like, I got a gig at the Legion, like, let's do it. And I want everyone to be like, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's, you know what I mean? And the way to do that, I think, is just to be as honest as you can about what you want, about your intentions, about your ambitions, and and just sort of go from there, you know? I think there's never been a better time to be a musician. Frankly, I I I, I think that even when I started, which wasn't that long ago, but it was like, you know, 20 years ago or something, like, you needed money to do stuff, right? Like recording studio. I mean, you could do home recordings. People were recording on 4 tracks and stuff like that. But for the most part, you know, the record business was still thriving, and to make a record, or, for most people, it required capital, right? You needed a record deal to get the money to go to the studio and hire an engineer, and then you got to buy tape, and it's this big laborious process. And then to put it out, you got to figure out how to get it to the stores. Then you got to have a marketing budget and music videos and like hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know? And even indie records were just like really expensive, you know? And I think that's, for the most part, that's all gone now. You can record an incredible album on this laptop that I'm doing my emails on, is the same laptop that I mix my album on, you know? And it's literally a Grammy nominated album. So, at the risk of like tooting my own horn or whatever, it's just like the tools to make the stuff has become more democratized, more accessible. You know, Old Town Road was like made with a beat that you can like download for $50 off your phone. And it's like the most successful song in the world. You know, they've just made it like on GarageBand, like with a just canned beat or whatever. And I mean, whether you like the tune or not is a separate issue. But what I'm saying is, the tools to kind of make the music and to put the music out and to market yourself, whether it's through Instagram or YouTube or all these different social media platforms that you can kind of build yourself. I just think that sort of opens it up to more people. And you don't need to wait for someone to discover what you're doing. Just start doing. If you're doing something cool, it seems to sort of take on a bit of an orbit, and it, like anything, it just has a gravitational pull. It'll just pull more and more people in, you know? I mean, my path was like more organic, in the sense that like it was much more just like play gigs, meet other people, play other gigs, join their band, tour with them for a while, open for someone. Over the course of that tour, you kind of sit in for a couple songs, and then maybe by the end of the tour, you're like, oh, you should come play on our album. It was more just like bouncing around as opposed to some calculated path. But, I think obviously there's a lot of frustration with the sort of funding model for streaming platforms and all that stuff. And I guess my opinion is just like, it's just it's not figured out yet what it is. We as consumers have decided that we don't want to pay for music, we don't want to pay for news, we don't want to pay for our email accounts, we don't want to pay for anything. So if you don't want to pay for anything, right away you're limiting how much of a say you have in that thing, right? And so, again, I'm not making any excuses. I would love to get I do pretty well on the streaming platforms, but the fat check hasn't shown up yet. I'd love for it to be a bigger number too. And I support kind of like, addressing that issue head on and figuring, well, what is the right number? What is a fair number? But the reality is if people don't want to pay for these things anymore, and we've prioritized the internet as being free, it sort of limits what we can do at the gate, So anyway, I'm probably deviating now from the initial question, but I do think it's a great time to be an artist. I think it's a great time to be a musician. I think there's so many opportunities there that you don't have to wait for. You used to have to wait to get signed or get a booking agent or get whatever. It's like you can do so many things on your own now. And that's just better. That's just better for the music. It's better for everybody, unless we want gatekeepers, unless you want people to decide for you with their sense of taste. And there's only so many Clive Davises or Jimmy Iovine's or whatever. There's only so many out there, right? There's plenty of guys who have shitty tastes, who are signing shitty bands, who are pumping tons of money into, you know what I mean? Like there's always going to be that. So to my mind, less gatekeepers and more tools for creative people to make cool things to get out into the world. And then, figuring out how to monetize them seems to be kind of like the dominant conversation that nobody has an answer to, right? Now, there's so many things competing for your attention, for your time, and for your money, right? It's like, but when I think about the portion of my income that I actually spend on music, on news, on literature, it's way down. And I think most people are in that boat. There's always exceptions. There's Doug Paisleys who just collect records like nonstop, but even he's buying like $2 records out of the discount bin or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a great time to be a musician, and I think young people should consider that, especially as other work that we thought of as secure work. We thought of it as like, get a great job. Like that's becoming less and less of a thing, there's no guarantees. You could get a great job working for Tesla and think that, oh, I'm great. I'm making 150 grand a year or something. And then 3 years later, you might be working for somebody else, Well, I think one thing that I'm pleasantly surprised with is that, I've been sort of fortunate to work with some great musicians, and in a lot of cases, they're older than I am, some cases 60s, 70s, 80s, I worked on this Robbie Robertson record a few years ago. And the one thing that all these people seem to have in common is that they just still love music. They just still are in pursuit of like trying to get that new sound or write a new song or come up with a lyric that just like feels like those words haven't been put together that way before, And that's just so cool to meet people that are 30 years ahead of me that are still seeking that out, and they're calling me and they're saying, hey, can you come be a part of this thing? It's like, I want to be the guy who's 75, who's like calling the young 40-year-old guy to say like, oh, I love the way you do the vocals, or, can you come by and let's do something together. Like, I just want to still be doing it. I still enjoy it. It's just fun. If you're having fun doing it when no one's listening, then you're really going to have fun doing it when you have an audience, and no one can take that away from you. It's not about the fame. It's not about the anything. It's just really is about the work at the end of the day. And all the people that I've worked with that I really respect and enjoyed working with, like they all kind of have that in common. It's just about the work. Just focus on the work. Just try and make the best thing you can, and avoid the hype, avoid all that stuff, should definitely call me to play guitar and call you to play bass. And that's probably the most solid piece of advice. If you want to succeed, know who to call. Um, it's so hard, because if I think about all my friends, even the bands that I've played in as a sideman or whatever, everyone's story is so different. Even though we're all kind of the same and we're on a similar thing, we're like I said earlier, we're all just bouncing around in this thing, and you just say yes or no. If things get put in front of you, you say yes or no, and try and say yes more than you say no. That's probably the best piece of advice that I could give, is try and say yes more than you say no. Darcy has this thing which I think is so good. There's three criteria for whether you're going to say yes to a gig, and you have to have two of the three in order to say yes. All right. So the criteria is there's three things: either good money, good music, or good people. Very rarely are you going to have all three. Very rarely. But you have to have at least two. You can have good people and good money, but the music is maybe not quite as challenging, or and you'll make that sacrifice, and that could be one of the greatest tours of your life, because you're surrounded by great people, and you come home and you got a little bit of change in your pocket and you think, fuck, that was a great tour. Or you can have no money and great people and good music. Hopefully that's a good one. No money and good people and good music, and you'll have an incredible time. You'll be pushed artistically. You'll be surrounded by musicians who are better than you are, and you'll be, fuck, I want to dig deep. I want to challenge myself. That's a great combination too, right? So you got to have two of the three. And if there's two of the three is there on the table, then say yes to the gig. The one thing I'll just say before we jump off is just like, there's no shortcut. You know what I mean? Like there is no shortcut. It's like working out. It's just like, there's a direct connection to the effort that you put in. And if there is a shortcut, if you feel like you found a little hack or a shortcut, it's fleeting. It's temporary. It's not going to give you the same feeling of earning it, of success that you're going to get if you just put the work in. It's not a toy, and it's an instrument. It requires your full dedication. It demands it. And it's, it's not just a job, it's a craft. It's something that you work on over time, you get better at. There's no reason why I won't be able to write my best album 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's like Paul McCartney did pretty well with the Beatles. The guy is still writing new songs. He's still trying to find new things. Why? That kind of tells you everything. It's like, because that's all it's about. That's all it's ever about. And yeah, so there's no shortcut. Just put in the work and earn it. And sooner or later, you'll realize that, wow, I'm pretty good. I got something going on here. I can hold my own, in a group of my peers and stuff. And that starts to feel good.